Motion pictures made their debut in Modesto during the second decade of the last century. There was the Star Theater on 10th Street, where the old Crest building presently stands. The auditorium at 6th and I, later known as the Mary Garden. The Isis featured daily picture changes of films that had been licensed and censored. The Dreamland, just around the corner from the Isis, boasted of its exits and ventilation. The Modesto Theater, built in 1912, was the very first to show talking pictures. It also featured vaudeville shows and community events. You can still see the dome of what was once the Modesto Theater on 10th Street. Other local theaters included the Lyric, later named the Esquire. The Quonset Hut-styled La Loma Theater once stood at the corner of Yosemite and La Loma next to the former Forest Department Store. In 1921, Modesto's Strand Theater celebrated its grand opening with a showing of The Mark of Zorro, starring the swashbuckling Douglas Fairbanks. With a capacity of 1,800, a mighty Wurlitzer organ, elaborate murals, and an Art Nouveau curtain, the Strand was advertised as the Valley's finest theater. All of these theaters slowly declined, and many fell to the Wreckers Ball. The State Theater, which opened in 1934, could have suffered a similar fate, but fortunately for our community, that didn't happen. This is the story of Modesto's historic State Theater. Beginning in the 1990s and continuing today, local citizens came to the rescue to save Modesto's remaining historic theater and to ensure its continued operation. The State first opened its doors on December 25, 1934. The theater was designed by S. Charles Lee, one of the nation's outstanding designers of Art Deco movie houses. He designed more than 300 movie theaters, including the Merced, the Fox Theater in Stockton, and the Fox Theater in Bakersfield. The architect's motto was, "The show starts on the sidewalk." The architect's plan was brought to life in Modesto by local builder Harry Brown at a cost of $100,000. The first film shown at the new State Theater was Flirtation Walk, starring Dick Powell, Ruby Keeler, and Pat O'Brien. It was accompanied by La Cucaracha, a romantic melody drama of old Mexico. General admission was 35 cents, loges were 40 cents, and children got in for a dime. Jack Ulrich, who at a very young age managed the State Theater shortly after it opened, describes his efforts to promote the new State Theater.
They let me do the advertising for the theater. I had my little car, covered it with the prizes, and drove around like that to advertise. When we were playing the, I believe it was called Old Chicago, went up on the roof and we got some smudge pots and put them along the edge and had them blowing smoke, which someone thought it was on fire, and the fire engines came and so forth, and turned out to be just one of my ideas that boomeranged a little bit.
2 years ago, when they had the grand opening of this theater, I came that night, and I came by myself, and I walked up the ramp, and I lost it. I just got so emotional, I couldn't believe it. In fact, I'm getting emotional right now.
I parked around the corner on 14th Street, and as I came around the corner, immediately I felt like I was back in high school again. Things seemed the same. I felt like I was coming to the theater again, and started to look for the little restaurant that was next door that we always went to after the movies, so it was a wonderful feeling.
I was in the 7th grade at Roosevelt Junior High School. We lived on 13th and H. My mother had a boarding and rooming house for men. She said women are too hard to please. And we could walk very easily from there down to the State Theater, my sister and I, clutching our dime in our hands, and we congregated with all of the other children who were waiting outside of the theater for the doors to open. And it was very exciting. And for us, a dime was big money.
First, my name's Jan Sasso. Rose Sasso was my aunt. She was really proud to run the theaters, and we go way back. I mean, Saturdays, this is where everyone would come. Always well dressed. I'm probably one of the few people could see her sitting at a kitchen table with her pajamas on drinking coffee, but you would never see her leave the house unless she was decked out, nice suits, always a brooch, hair always done nice.
Rose was very particular about our appearance. She wanted us to meet her standards, which we did. Rose was a wonderful, wonderful manager, and we gave her our all.
Frankly, the fondest memories I have are coming to the State Theater with my mother. I remember coming to see Vertigo here, which was, I think, the first Hitchcock film I'd ever seen. And she brought me here, and I saw that film, and it really opened my eyes to what I consider great filmmaking.
My earliest memories of the State Theater is, I remember I was very young. My dad was going to school. He was a teacher. He worked part-time here on the weekends and during the summer. And I remember he brought me here quite a bit, and especially during the days when there were no movies showing, when he would be up here prepping or doing whatever, I would pretty much have the place to myself. I'd be able to run around. And actually right now my daughters are down there running around pretty much emulating the same behavior and activities that I used to do.
There was always a chapter of a serial, and each chapter ended with a cliffhanger. And the cliffhanger left you just breathless to know what was going to happen the next week.
They were going to put usherettes in, and if I would come back and manage the theater, he would let me choose the usherettes. I went back to work, and I did hire the usherettes.
I got this job at the State, and I was just nuts about it. I was so delighted to be able to get to work here. This was a really prime place to work.
There were no jobs for girls in those days unless you wanted to be a waitress or work in the fruit sheds in the summer. And a very coveted job was usherette.
It was so much fun here, and I loved the camaraderie among the other usherettes. We did wear uniforms, and we had summer ones and we had winter ones.
They did have a jacket that had piping around it.
And the summer ones were a lot thinner, and they were navy blue, and I know they had big flary legs on the bottom like the sailors' bell bottoms.
My connection with the State Theater is that my mother, Marguerite Grinstead, was the first spotlight girl when the theater opened in 1934. She stood in the spotlight in the lobby and wore a beautiful gown and greeted the patrons as they came in. And she was not the original choice for the spotlight girl, but when Mr. Mann, the theater owner, came for the opening, he saw her and she had beautiful red hair, so he wanted her to stand under the spotlight. And while she was working here, she met my father, and his name was Bill Owen. He worked as a projectionist, moonlighting here. And some prankster had thrown a stink bomb in the theater, and all the employees had to run and find it, and that's how the two of them met and subsequently married, and were married for 63 years.
We had to stand at a certain station to make sure that, you know, things didn't go awry in the room, and sometimes they did. Those kids up in the balcony did naughty things. I will be discreet and say they blew up balloons, but they were not balloons. Yelled and hollered and hooted and whistled, and nobody could control them, but they did it every Saturday night.
I'm very grateful for it being here, and they've done a beautiful job on restoring it. And I'm so glad they did. What a shame if this had been lost. It'd take a lot of memories away.